All right, this is the video for Module 10. Moving right along. Um, let's see. In Module 10, you're going to read Spring Chapter 10. You're going to read Ravitch Chapter 7 and Linda Darling Hammond Chapter 7 as well. So I guess let's get right to it here with Chapter 10 of Spring. Chapter 10 is a really interesting chapter, I think, especially for our current times, for our current status of education that we're dealing with right now, and our focus on testing. It's not a new thing. There's been focus on different kinds of standardized testing for many, many generations, honestly. And we swing back and forth with a pendulum, obviously, with different reforms between how much, how much status we give to testing scores and so forth, or how much importance we give to them. But you start to learn where a lot of this comes from. Now, remember, during the industrial or around the turn of the century, the early 1900s, industry has totally taken off in the United States. The factory model. You're going to learn a little bit about Taylorism, and this is this standardization, this organization business model that leads everyone to believe that this is the way to really maximize your production. And it may be true in the business world to maximize production, but the issue is, at this time in history as well, people will start to look at schools in much the same fashion, and they will start saying, hey, what if we take these principles here and put them over into the schools? Let's see if it works. Does any of this sound familiar? Because this was like 100 years ago. Anyway, you'd think we would learn something. But, my opinion about that is that educational historians, people who know about these things, are not the ones making policy. People making policy don't have a clue, honestly, about educational history. So they don't know these things have been done before and didn't work the first time. Okay, so that's my little aside. But anyway, so Chapter 10, standardization, becomes a really, really big issue. How can we standardize schools? And that, there's not per se something wrong with standardization. I mean, obviously, you do want children who are in all different communities, all different areas, to receive equal, an equal type of education. You certainly don't want a lesser education to be happening. So standardization is good in some respects, but if you take it a little too far, I think, you like anything, in moderation. I mean, you find that you can't go completely in one direction with a business model and apply it to children and expect it to work properly. So you're going to learn a little bit about that. Testing, IQ testing. Remember, there's different types of tests. There are diagnostic tests, there's ability tests, there's achievement tests. Ability tests, these are IQ tests, and these are based on the principle that you can actually measure someone's ability to learn. And that is a little different than measuring someone like an achievement test, which is more like, the ITBS or one of those. These types of tests measure how much you were able to achieve compared. It's always a comparison to others of your age group. So obviously ability tests are a little different because they're making claims that you're, for lack of a better way to put it, you're this smart versus this other person who's not as smart. Okay, so they're a little trickier. The COGATs are a test like that. They give those tests in the schools, the cognitive abilities test. There's this Stanford Binet. I think it used to be called that. I'm not sure it's called that anymore. But anyway, you get the idea that there are different types of tests. Well, these became popular around World War I, and they were generally used to classify different personnel in the military. People who would take this test, and then you would be put over here, and then if you scored below a certain amount, you would be put over here. I guess you'd peel potatoes or something. I don't know exactly. But anyway, they were used for classification purposes. Well, remember, and there's a link in the PowerPoint that you can see some of the questions for some of these early tests. You'll have to definitely click on it because some of these questions are really interesting, and you can tell how there is bias built into a lot of these questions. So what are they really measuring? Are they truly measuring your intelligence? quotient, your ability, or are they measuring your cultural foundations and what you're used to, the cultural milieu that you grew up in, let's say. So anyway, there's some really interesting stuff there about intelligence tests. And of course, after World War I, all of these makers have all of these tests available. So, where can I make money off of this? Where can I apply this and still, and I'm not saying, I don't mean to be cynical about it, because maybe there was a good intention behind it to help students. But of course, they look to the school system, like many businesses always do, because you've got a large audience, you've got a huge compulsory public school system. How can I make money off of that? And it's capitalist society, so of course that's going to be one of the questions that is drawn a lot of the time, especially today. You'll see more and more as we get to current times. Anyway, so you'll learn a little bit about that. There's some links within the PowerPoint. Definitely click on them. I've got a couple of videos in there just to give you a background of certain things. You'll learn a little bit about the eugenics movement, which many people don't realize happened in this country. So definitely click on that and watch that. Because again, if history teaches us nothing, we should definitely learn from that particular movement. Anyway, so you're going to move on into, let's see, Ravitch chapter 7. Ravitch chapter 7 is a great chapter, especially for current days. Many of you are probably aware that we are moving to a charter school system, whether we like it or not. Charter schools are basically private schools with public funding, and they don't have to always follow the same rules that public schools have to follow. How that's possibly fair, you ask? I don't know. Policymakers think it is, and again, policymakers are often influenced by big corporations that want to privatize public schooling because there is a way to make money off of it. That's the cynical approach. And the other approach would be, well, maybe these businessmen just want to apply a business model so that they can improve it. And that's always, again, there's two sides to the same coin. Diane Ravitch gives a great overview couched in the term of choice, the story of choice. And that includes vouchers, that includes all the different plans that have happened over the course of history that have led to what we now have, which is charter schools. And, charter schools had a very different beginning. And like many other things, when they go from the drawing board and they make it to the actual implementation of the program, you tend to see a huge difference. So, and she's been criticized. Again, I will tell you that there's a lot of people, even in my field, my friends are like, you're using Diane Ravitch's book to teach your class? Because she's kind of hated in some circles. She's very criticized because of a lot of the things that she supported. But she's turned, completely 180, and now she doesn't, and she speaks out against these things. So to me, I think that's more interesting. But you'll learn her ideas in the beginning, why she supported this so much, and now you'll learn, okay, well, hey, this is what it actually panned out to be. This is why I don't support it now. But whether or not you support it, I think the fact remains that many of our schools are being turned to charter schools. Many of our states are supporting the whole movement of all of the schools to a charter school model. So I think it's definitely important. This is a very important chapter for you. So, okay, so then Darling Hammond, chapter 7. And let me just say, that's not to say that there aren't good charter schools out there. I know that there are some that are doing very well. Now, the problem is not all of them are like that, and not all of them do as well as, let's say, the Khan Academies or KIPP, the KIPP program. I know one of my friends in California, her kid is in a KIPP program. I've been very impressed with what I've seen from that. But there are reasons for that too, which I won't go into right now. But so let's see, Darling Hammond, chapter 7. She talks about teacher preparation and teacher training, teacher development, and she basically lays out her whole goal, I think, of the book, of her research, of everything, and that is essentially the better prepared of a teacher you have, the more respected they are in the field, in their field, the more professionalized they are, the better you'll have on all the kinds of measurements that you need, the end measurements, how well students perform, how well teachers perform, how well schools perform. this is one of those huge factors that the research has shown has definitely, not just correlation, it's causation, I think is what she would probably argue, having really well prepared teachers. An interesting thing that comes up in this chapter, though, is she talks about District 2. Remember District 2 from New York? That we heard back in chapter 3 in the Ravitch book. Okay, well, now you get to see her perspective about, she brings it up in a different way. She brings it up as an example of something a little bit different. So I think that's what is it the journal question? Yeah, the journal question this time around is going to be about, what do you think? What does Darling Hammond attribute the success of District 2 to, and to what does Ravitch attribute the success? They both have different ideas about, and obviously I don't know that I can give you a right or wrong answer. I know what my opinion is, but again, review those two stories of District 2 and tell me what you think. Who's right? Who's right in this situation about this particular school district? And then let's see. You'll have a discussion, and it's on meritocracy. This is a very, very American term, a very American concept, I think. And Spring brings it up in chapter 10, and I think that it's definitely pertinent to a lot of the conversations that we have about schooling. So I'd like your ideas about that. I'd like to see what you say. So then I think, let's see, schools in film essay. Your critique essay is coming up. I believe it's due in Module 11, at the end of Module 11, so make sure that you are, looking into that. Everything you need for that can be found in the Assignments tab in ELC. Really, you really should start thinking a lot of things are going to start coming due pretty quick, like either every week or every other week. Your project is your research project, your PowerPoint project is due, I think, a couple of weeks after that. So things are going to start becoming due relatively quickly here. So make sure that you're prepared for that. And then, as well as your, what would you call it? Your field experience placement. Sorry. So I think that's it for Module 10. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I was really impressed with your midterms. I really enjoyed reading them, and I think you guys all did a really good job. So thank you for that. And make sure you're using APA. Many of you are still a little confused about that. Again, I gave you a link for that. Go to the OWL Purdue, the online writing lab that they give some great pointers. I refer to it often in my own work, writing and stuff and such. So make sure you're using APA. And that's it. I'll see you next time.